Dr. Milo Vance pressed his palm against the observation deck's cool metal railing, watching the binary suns of Kepler 438 paint the research station in shifting hues of amber and rose. 3 months into the xenobiology mission, and he still found the alien sunsets breathtaking. What didn't take his breath away, however, was the growing tension in his lab. The cellular samples from Sector 7 show no degradation, came the familiar, melodic voice behind him. Varia's words carried that characteristic Zirani precision, each syllable perfectly measured, emotionally neutral. Milo turned to find his research assistant standing closer than usual, her pale purple skin almost luminescent in the dying light. Her dark curls framed angular features that embodied the Zirani ideal, beautiful, serene, untouchable. But something was different today. "That's good news," he said, noticing how her violet eyes lingered on his face instead of immediately returning to her data pad. "The biodiversity readings? Consistent with preliminary projections." But she didn't look at her notes. Instead, her gaze dropped to his hands gripping the railing, studying them with an intensity that made him self-conscious. Milo had worked with Zirani researchers before. They were the perfect scientific partners, logical, methodical, completely free from the emotional turbulence that could compromise objective analysis. The Zirani had evolved beyond primal instincts centuries ago, achieving what they considered evolutionary perfection through emotional suppression. So why was Varia breathing differently? "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, immediately regretting the question. Zirani didn't experience illness the way humans did, and they certainly didn't have feelings to speak of. But instead of the polite correction he expected, Varia's expression shifted into something he'd never seen before, confusion mixed with what almost looked like yearning. "I have been experiencing irregularities," she admitted, her usual composure wavering. "Physical responses that don't correlate with any known Zirani biological functions." "What kind of irregularities?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could detect the faint, sweet scent that seemed to emanate from her skin. "Elevated core temperature. Increased respiratory rate. And..." She paused, those violet eyes meeting his directly. "Persistent focus on non-essential stimuli. Such as..." "You." The word hung between them like a charged particle in the station's recycled air. Milo felt his own heart rate spike, something that didn't go unnoticed by his companion's apparently heightened senses. "Your cardiac rhythm just accelerated," she observed, tilting her head. Why? How could he explain human attraction to someone whose species had supposedly evolved past such things? How could he tell her that her intense scrutiny had been affecting him too, making him hyper-aware of every graceful movement, every melodic inflection in her voice? "Varia," he began carefully, "when you say you've been focusing on me. I observe the way your hands move when you work," she interrupted, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The slight elevation of your vocal pitch when you're excited about a discovery. The way you unconsciously run your fingers through your hair when you're thinking." She paused, looking almost distressed. "These observations serve no scientific purpose, yet I cannot cease making them." Milo's throat went dry. In the 3 months they'd worked together, he'd assumed her attentiveness was purely professional. Now he wondered if he'd been blind to something developing right under his nose. "And this bothers you?" he asked. "It should," she said, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty that was completely foreign to Zirani communication patterns. "According to everything I understand about my physiology, these responses are impossible. Yet they persist. They intensify." She looked out at the binary sunset, and for the first time since he'd known her, Dr. Varia appeared genuinely vulnerable. "Dr. Vance, I believe something is fundamentally wrong with me." The way she said it, with such quiet devastation, made Milo's chest ache. Without thinking, he reached out and gently touched her arm. Her skin was indeed warmer than usual, and at the contact, she drew in a sharp breath. "Maybe," he said softly, "nothing's wrong at all." The next morning, Varia didn't report to the lab at her usual time. When she finally arrived, nearly an hour late, her typically immaculate appearance showed signs of distress. Her dark curls were disheveled, and her violet eyes held a wild, almost desperate quality. "I didn't sleep," she announced without preamble, setting down her data pad with uncharacteristic force. "For the first time in my adult life, I was unable to achieve the meditative rest state. Instead, I thought." Milo looked up from his microscope, concerned. "About what?" "You." The word came out like a confession. "Your touch yesterday, it created sensations I lack terminology to describe. And the thoughts that followed." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he'd never seen from any Zirani. "Dr. Vance, I fear I may be experiencing what your species calls desire." The scientific samples suddenly seemed far less important than the being standing before him, radiating confusion and need. Milo set down his equipment and gave her his full attention. "Can you describe what you're feeling?" Varia began to pace, her usual fluid grace replaced by restless energy. "There's heat, not just in my skin but deeper. An ache that intensifies when I look at you. When you speak, I focus more on the movement of your mouth than your words. When you worked with the plant specimens yesterday, I found myself wondering what those hands would feel like." She stopped abruptly, as if surprised by her own admission. "Would feel like doing what?" Her pale purple skin darkened slightly, a Zirani physiological response he'd never witnessed before. "Touching me. Everywhere." The lab's climate control systems hummed in the silence that followed. Milo felt his own body responding to her words, to the raw honesty in her voice. "Varia," he said carefully, "what you're describing sounds like attraction. Sexual attraction." "But that's impossible," she said, her voice rising with panic. "Zirani eliminated such base impulses millennia ago. We are beyond physical desire, beyond the chaos of emotional attachment. It's what makes us superior to." She stopped, looking stricken. "I apologize. I didn't mean to imply." "It's okay," Milo said, standing slowly. "But maybe your people weren't as successful at eliminating those impulses as they thought. Maybe they were just dormant." She shook her head vigorously. "No. This is wrong. I am wrong. There must be some contamination, some alien pathogen affecting my neurochemistry. You must help me find a cure." The desperation in her voice made his heart clench. "What if there's nothing to cure?" "Then I am broken," she whispered. "And I will never be able to return to my people." Milo moved closer, noting how her breathing quickened as the distance between them decreased. "What if being broken is actually becoming whole?" "I don't understand. Your people pride themselves on emotional control, but what if emotion isn't weakness? What if it's completion?" Varia's violet eyes searched his face. "The intensity of what I feel for you, it's overwhelming. Sometimes I can barely think of anything else. How do humans function with such chaos in their minds?" "We learn to channel it," he said softly. "We let it fuel us, connect us, make us more than we were alone." She took a shaky breath. "I dreamed of you last night. In my dream, you held me, and the ache became something else. Something beautiful." "Dreams can be a way of processing new experiences," Milo said, his voice husky. "Your mind is trying to understand what your body is feeling." "Is this what love feels like?" she asked, the alien word sounding strange on her lips. "It could be the beginning of it." She stepped closer, so close he could see the flecks of silver in her violet eyes. "Will you help me understand? Will you show me what these feelings mean?" Instead of answering with words, Milo reached up and gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. At the contact, she closed her eyes and leaned into his touch with a soft sound that was part relief, part surrender. "Yes," he whispered. "I'll show you." Over the following days, Milo approached Varia's condition with the same methodical care he applied to his xenobiology research. But this investigation was far more personal, and infinitely more delicate. He set up a private workspace in his quarters, away from the lab's monitoring systems. If we're going to understand what's happening to you, he explained, we need complete privacy. Varia sat across from him, her posture rigid with uncertainty. My people would consider this consultation a form of madness. They believe emotion leads only to chaos and destruction. What do you believe? Milo asked, making notes on his tablet. She was quiet for a long moment. I believe that everything I was taught about my own nature may have been wrong. Yesterday, when you touched my face. She paused, her violet eyes meeting his. I felt more myself than I ever have before. Milo set down his tablet. Tell me about your physical responses. When did they first begin? 6 weeks ago, she said, her voice becoming clinical, a safe retreat into familiar territory. I noticed elevated skin temperature when you entered a room. Increased heart rate during our conversations. But I dismissed these as environmental factors. What changed? A faint flush darkened her pale purple skin. You were working late one evening, studying the nocturnal pollination patterns. I came to deliver additional samples and found you asleep at your desk. You looked. She struggled for words. Peaceful. Vulnerable. Beautiful. Milo felt warmth spread through his chest. You've been attracted to me for 6 weeks. I stood there for nearly an hour, just watching you sleep, she confessed. I wanted to touch your hair, to trace the line of your jaw. The intensity of that desire frightened me. But you didn't act on it. Zirani don't act on desires. We transcend them. But her voice lacked conviction. Milo leaned forward. What if transcending them isn't evolution? What if it's suppression? Explain. Your people eliminated emotional expression, but the capacity remained. It's been dormant, waiting for the right catalyst. He gestured between them. Extended close contact with someone who triggered those ancient pathways. Varia absorbed this theory, her scientific mind processing the implications. You're suggesting that my attraction to you has awakened dormant neural networks. It's possible. Human biochemistry shows that attraction involves complex interactions between hormones, neurotransmitters, and genetic factors. If Sirani physiology is similar, then I'm not broken, she breathed. I'm awakening. That's my hypothesis. She stood and began pacing, her movements less agitated than before. But if this is natural, why do I feel such conflict? Such fear? Because you're experiencing something completely outside your cultural framework. It's like trying to understand color when you've lived your entire life in monochrome. Varia stopped pacing and looked at him directly. Will you help me understand the full spectrum? The question held layers of meaning. Milo rose from his chair, closing the distance between them. Are you sure? Once we explore this, there may be no going back to who you were before. I don't want to go back, she said with surprising firmness. I want to go forward. Slowly, carefully, Milo reached for her hand. Her fingers trembled as they intertwined with his, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she studied their joined hands with fascination. Your skin is rougher than mine, she observed. Warmer. The contact creates pressure sensations that travel up my arm and... She looked surprised. Throughout my entire body. That's normal, Milo said softly. Touch creates neural pathways, releases chemicals that make us feel good. Is this why humans seek physical contact? One reason. We're social creatures. Touch helps us bond, feel safe, loved. She lifted their joined hands, examining them from different angles. I want to understand more. Will you show me other forms of touch? Milo's breath caught. If you're comfortable with that. With her free hand, Varia reached up and touched his face, mirroring the gesture he'd made in the lab. Her fingers traced his features with scientific curiosity mixed with something deeper. Your facial structure is so different from Zirani males, she murmured. Stronger jaw, different bone density. But when I touch you like this. Her thumb brushed across his lower lip, and he inhaled sharply. You respond. Why? Because touch from someone you're attracted to activates pleasure centers in the brain. It feels good. Show me what feels good for you, she whispered. Taking her hand, Milo guided it to rest over his heart. Feel that? Her eyes widened at the rapid rhythm beneath her palm. Your cardiovascular system is reacting to my touch. To you, he corrected. My body responds to you, Varia. The way you look at me, the way you move, the sound of your voice saying my name. She was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. Then, with growing confidence, she stepped closer until they were nearly touching. I think, she said softly, I'm beginning to understand. That evening, Varia appeared at Milo's quarters with an expression of nervous determination. She'd changed from her standard research attire into something softer, a flowing garment that highlighted the elegant lines of her form. I've been thinking, she said without preamble, about what you said regarding the full spectrum of experience. Milo set aside his tablet, giving her his complete attention. And? I want to explore it. With you. She paused, vulnerability flickering across her features. But I need you to guide me. My people have no customs, no knowledge about intimate connection. The trust in her voice humbled him. Milo stood slowly, approaching her with the same care he'd use with a rare and precious specimen. We go at your pace, he said softly. You tell me what you want, what feels right. She nodded, then reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally now. When you touched my face earlier, I felt warmth spreading through my entire body. I want to understand what other touches might feel like. Milo lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The contact made her breath hitch, her violet eyes widening in wonder. That simple contact created such intense sensations, she marveled. How is that possible? Nerve endings, he explained, continuing to place soft kisses along her fingers. Areas of high sensitivity that connect to pleasure centers in your brain. Where else? She whispered. Instead of answering with words, Milo gently guided her hand to his lips, showing her how he responded to her touch. Then, with infinite care, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, a chaste, tender kiss that nevertheless made her sway slightly. Oh, she breathed. That's different from anything I've ever felt. Different how? Like warmth blooming under my skin. Like every nerve ending has become more sensitive. She looked up at him with growing wonder. Is this why humans kiss? It's one reason. Kissing is intimate, connecting. It's a way of sharing breath, sharing space. With tentative curiosity, Varia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his cheek. The soft contact sent electricity through both of them. Your skin tastes different than I expected, she said, studying his face. Salt and something uniquely, you. Milo cupped her face gently, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Varia, are you sure about this? Once we cross certain lines. I've already crossed them, she interrupted. The moment I acknowledged what I feel for you, there was no returning to who I was before. She leaned into his touch. I want to discover who I'm becoming. With reverent slowness, Milo leaned down and touched his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, exploratory, a question rather than a demand. For a moment, Varia went perfectly still, processing the new sensation. Then, with a soft sound of wonder, she kissed him back. When they parted, her eyes were bright with discovery. That was. She touched her lips in amazement. I felt it everywhere. How is such a simple contact so overwhelming? Because it's not just physical, Milo said, his voice rough with emotion. When you care about someone, when there's attraction and connection, every touch becomes amplified. She studied his face, noting his dilated pupils, his quickened breathing. You're experiencing the same intensity. More, he admitted. Because I've been fighting my attraction to you for months. Her expression shifted to surprise. You have. You're brilliant, beautiful, fascinating. Working beside you every day, watching your mind work, seeing your rare smiles. He shook his head. I thought it was one-sided. Nothing about this feels one-sided, she murmured, stepping closer until her body was almost pressed against his. I want to feel more. Will you show me? Instead of answering, Milo drew her fully into his arms, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Her alien anatomy was similar enough to human that their bodies aligned naturally, but different enough to be exotic, thrilling. Tell me what you feel, he whispered against her ear, making her shiver. Heat, she breathed. Connection. Like every cell in my body is awakening to something it never knew it needed. Her arms wound around his neck. Is this what your species calls making love? This is the beginning, he said softly. Physical intimacy is about exploration, giving pleasure, sharing vulnerability. Show me, she whispered. Show me what it means to be vulnerable with someone you trust. As the station's artificial night deepened around them, Milo began to introduce Varia to the language of touch, soft caresses that mapped the elegant curves of her form, gentle kisses that taught her about desire and response. Every new sensation brought gasps of wonder from her, every touch revealing new depths to her awakening nature. She was a quick learner, soon discovering how to make him gasp in turn, her scientific curiosity transforming into something deeper, the joy of bringing pleasure to someone she cared for. I understand now, she whispered as they moved together in the ancient dance of intimacy. This isn't just physical. It's communion. Yes, Milo breathed, lost in the wonder of her discovery, the trust she placed in him. It's sharing everything you are with someone else. And in that moment, as they crossed the threshold from colleagues to lovers, Varia realized she wasn't broken at all, she was finally, beautifully whole. 3 weeks had passed since that transformative night, and the research station felt like an entirely different world. Varia moved through her days with a new confidence, her emotional awakening having unlocked not just passion, but a deeper understanding of herself. The morning data compilation is complete, she announced, entering the lab where Milo was analyzing soil samples. But instead of maintaining professional distance, she moved to stand beside him, her hand briefly touching his shoulder in a gesture of casual intimacy. Such small touches had become natural between them, moments of connection that no longer seemed foreign or frightening to her. She had learned to speak the language of affection, and it suited her beautifully. Any anomalies in the readings? Milo asked, leaning into her touch. Nothing that threatens our research, she replied, then smiled, an expression that came easily now. Though I did notice elevated temperature readings in Sector 12. Environmental factor. Human factor, she said with gentle humor. I believe that's where we conducted our field research yesterday afternoon. Milo chuckled, remembering their impulsive escape from the lab to make love under the alien sky. We should probably be more discreet about that. Why? Varia asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Love is natural. Beautiful. Why should we hide something so profound? The casual way she said love made Milo's heart skip. In the weeks since her awakening, Varia had embraced every aspect of her new emotional range, joy, desire, affection, and yes, love, with the same scientific thoroughness she applied to everything else. Because your people might not understand, he said gently. Her expression grew serious. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. I received a transmission from the Zerani Council yesterday. Milo felt a chill of apprehension. About what? My extended assignment here. They're requesting a full report on my psychological state, given the unusual length of my deployment. She moved closer, seeking the comfort of his presence. They're concerned about potential contamination. What did you tell them? The truth, she said with quiet strength. That I've discovered aspects of my nature that were previously unknown. That my time with humans has revealed capacities for experience that my species believed were eliminated. How did they respond? Varia's violet eyes met his steadily. They want me to return immediately for evaluation and reconditioning. The words hit Milo like a physical blow. Reconditioning? Neural adjustment to suppress the pathways that have been activated. They consider my current state a form of psychological contamination that threatens Zirani evolutionary purity. You can't let them do that, Milo said urgently. What you've become, it's not contamination, it's growth. It's evolution in the truest sense. I know. Her voice held a certainty that surprised him. Which is why I'm not going back. What? Varia moved into his arms, her body fitting against his with familiar perfection. I've submitted a formal request to extend my assignment indefinitely. I've also sent a detailed scientific report documenting my emotional development, arguing that it represents a potential evolutionary advancement rather than regression. They'll never accept that, Milo said, though hope was blooming in his chest. Perhaps not the current council, she agreed. But there are others among my people who have begun to question the wisdom of emotional suppression. My report will reach them, and maybe, eventually, they'll see that what I've become isn't broken, but better. She looked up at him with eyes full of love and determination. I've learned that emotion doesn't make us weak, it makes us more than we were alone. Joy amplifies discoveries, love gives meaning to existence, passion drives us to excel. And if they try to force you to return? Then I'll choose exile, she said without hesitation. Because I would rather be whole and alone than empty and accepted. Milo pulled her closer, overwhelmed by her courage. You wouldn't be alone. No, she smiled, the expression radiant with happiness. I would have you. And perhaps someday, others of my kind will find the same courage to embrace what we were meant to be. She kissed him then, soft and deep, a gesture that would have been impossible for the emotionally suppressed being she'd once been. When they parted, her eyes shone with possibilities. Whatever happens, she whispered, I am grateful for what you've shown me. You didn't break me, you helped me discover I was never broken to begin with. I love you, Milo said, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd discovered together. I love you too, she replied, the alien concept now as natural to her as breathing. And I love who I've become because of that love. As they held each other in the lab where their journey had begun, both understood that they had crossed more than just the threshold of romance. They had pioneered a new kind of connection between species, proved that emotion wasn't weakness but strength, and shown that sometimes the greatest discoveries weren't found in distant stars, but in the courage to become more than you ever thought possible. Outside the observation windows, the binary suns continued their eternal dance, bathing the station in warm light that seemed to bless the love blooming within its walls. And somewhere in the depths of space, other Zirani might one day look up at those same stars and dream of their own awakening, their own chance to discover what it truly meant to be alive.